All right. So, in the previous video, we talked a bit about genetically modified crops and what we can do as individuals to help the ecosystem and ultimately try to, as best we can, minimize our ecological footprints and mimic the natural ecosystem processes that we see around us for agriculture. I want to take a minute and talk to you a little bit more about a particular issue that is a very, very important issue, particularly around Connecticut. Because we have so much coastal area, we worry a lot about erosion, particularly in our salt marshes. Erosion threatens ecosystems and agriculture all the time. And it's basically just the removal of material from one place and transported to another through wind or water forces. And when you have material moved from one place and deposited on there, we call that deposition. Um, Erosion and then deposition, right, are two natural processes. They happen all the time. You have a big storm or whatever, but we do things as humans to increase or exacerbate those effects. Um, what it really does for agriculture is um, it removes the topsoil faster rates, and you quickly deplete the nutrients and organic matter that plants need so much. Areas that are very windy or slopy have an increased risk of erosion. Also, when it precipitates, obviously gravity is pulling it down on the slope. And so, precipitation and wind will affect that even more. So, um, people make the land more vulnerable in many ways. And those are the three major ways. One is over cultivating fields. Basically, what you're doing is taking a lot of the plants out of a particular field and you're removing the root structure. And as a result of that, the soil is much softer and is able to be moved or deposited from one place to another. The second is overgrazing, which is the same problem. It's removing the natural plants there and the root system. And this is done by livestock. In particular, if you have really high density areas, it can happen very quickly. And lastly is clearing forests. And again, the same problem, removing a huge root structure, particularly if you have removal or clear cut of forests on steep slopes. Gravity is playing a role. If we look at these, the major issue is overall overgrazing, 34%, and then we have deforestation, and then cropland agriculture. So, more than 19 billion hectares of the world's cropland suffer from erosion. That's massive. And again, erosion rates are massive. You know, these are conventional agriculture and conventional tilling, where we remove the plants and we don't let them sit there on the ground. Um, Studies show that at least a tenfold difference in soil erosion rates due to human activities compared to all other natural causes. So it's clear that humans are a big influence when it comes to erosion. And what do we worry about with erosion? Obviously, the removal of nutrients and the decrease in production or yield of our plants, but also we're hurting the ecosystem. And we're going to change the ecosystem permanently, potentially. One phenomenon is something called desertification, where you're reducing the productivity by so much that it actually becomes an arid area. Most of the world's population actually lives in drylands, which are arid or semi-arid environments. It covers 40% of the Earth's land surface. And these particular dry lands are very susceptible to what we call desertification. Um, if more than 10% of productivity is lost, we consider that to be going through the phenomenon of desertification. And wind and water erosion are the two major causes of desertification. So what do we do with wind and water erosion? How can we stop this? This is, by the way, the Gobi Desert, right? As we can see on the fringe, and this is just growing in size. And it's forcing people out, destroying agricultural land. This is a historical reference to the Dust Bowl that, again, is an example of desertification, where we were constantly tilling and plowing the grasslands of the United States. Um, and so, in response, what we did was we passed the Soil Conservation Act of 1935. And what it did was it basically set up an agency to try to combat erosion. And the agency then trains experts who then train farmers um, and help farmers in choosing particular techniques that are going to reduce wind and water erosion. Um, so several things that we can do. So a number of approaches have been implemented since the Dust Bowl and 1935's Conservation Act, Soil Conservation Act. One is crop rotation. This is a process where you are changing your plants by seasons, and that's kind of cut off there from one season to the next, it says. If you alternate, for example, legumes with other plants, you're going to boost the nitrogen. So legumes and then another plant, and then the next season is legumes, and the next season is another plant, and the next season is legumes. You're constantly kind of going like this with the nitrogen, right? Keeping that in balance is a crucial thing for protecting our soil. Contour plowing. This is particularly useful when you have slopes. Water can erode, and so if you're slowing the flow of water, literally the force of water, by using contour plowing, you can reduce the amount of force on the soil that might pull or erode the soil. Terracing is another thing. Again, it's used in very steep terrain. Intercropping is where we have cover plants can be used to reduce wind erosion, to sort of protect other plants. And we can also have shelter belts. As you can see here, you have shelter belts that help to protect the wind. Conservation tilling is another interesting thing where we're reducing the amount of plowing that we do to remove the dead material that we don't need. Um, and that helps to reduce the amount of evaporation of water. It also helps to reduce the amount of wind effect on the soil and drying out the soil. It keeps the moisture in. And then we also have no-till. No-till farming is completely, no-till whatsoever. You just take the part of the plant that you need, and you let everything else die. Um, Grazing, as we said, is another huge factor. It's the number one factor, um, right? The number one factor for soil erosion. And overgrazing is what we're really talking about here. Overgrazing exposes soil, and I don't want to get into the positive feedback loop here, but it's something interesting to take a look at. Uh, it basically overgrazing continues to sort of degrade the soil after the original overgrazing. And so, what can we do? Well, we can have subsidies to help stabilize and secure the income of farmers. Um, and the problem with that, though, is when we have subsidies, it stabilizes and then it leads to land being cultivated that otherwise would not be. And it artificially increases food production and lowers the prices for other farmers. And so it just creates again, a positive feedback loop. And so what we have to do is really think critically about this and help support farmers that go into the Conservation Reserve Program, which is basically getting paid to convert damaged cropland to conservation reserves. The U.S. Farm Service has actually helped to create what's called an Environmental Benefits Index to identify and award contracts under that particular conservation program. And it benefits farmers that can show that they benefit wildlife and improve water and air quality and potentially reduce erosion. And that's it.